Where do you guys do your shopping? Now that might sound like a really weird topic for a video, but trust me, I'm onto something here. Now, I've been to town, as you will see from the footage that I filmed a bit earlier. And when I was walking around the town centre, or the city centre, there's one thing that really stood out to me. You walk down the high street, and even the periphery streets where you'd expect to find them, which I'm about to get into, but all the shops, they're all main brands, you know, it's JD. The cafes, the coffee shops and cafes, I should say, are now Costa's and Cafe Nero and the like. There's not much in terms of independence. Even the pubs are all Wetherspoons chains. A lot of the stuff that I talk about here on the channel is UK focused, but this is genuinely a trend that I think is apparent all across the world, or at least across the Western world as people call it. Small brands are just disappearing. Now, I'm sure many amongst you might be thinking, well, why are you talking about this? This is not the sort of content that you make. But if you think about it, it all kind of interlinks. You see, all of the businesses that are apparent now appear to be large companies. You know, whether we're talking, again, food, you've got your McDonald's, your KFCs, whether we're talking drinks, you've got your Costas and your Cafe Neros and the like. And whether we're talking, obviously, electronics, clothing, you've got all of these big branded stores all across the world. Now, that's great. And quite frankly, I wouldn't 100% complain about all of it, you know. It's always nice to have a cheap pair of Primark jeans, for example. Those who live in the UK and Europe will know exactly what I'm talking about. But this isn't necessarily a good thing, and we're already starting to see the negative effects of this in the modern day right now. So let's talk about what that looks like. So I guess when we think about business, business is a game. It's basically offer the best products, offer the best prices and the best service, and you will be successful. And 9 times out of 10, this is how a lot of these companies started off. McDonald's, super cheap food, or at least it used to be. The prices have definitely gone up. You know, the same is true for a lot of these places. Easy service, very easy to hand out. What we're seeing now though is, as the competition decreases, there's less of an incentive for big brands to do well or try hard. Because let's say, you know, you're on a high street in, not where I live, but a smaller town. I've had this happen to me myself, you know, you want to get some food, and you want to get some decent food, and some food that's reasonably priced, you know, you're not spending £20, £30 for a meal when you're on the go. And then you have a look round. There's no more traditional fish and chips. There's no more cheap, I don't know, pub food. There's a McDonald's, there's a KFC, and there's a Greggs. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I think, in my opinion of, you know, success in the Western world and in capitalism, it's about the concept of being able to make something of yourself. You know, you can start off poor in, say, England or France or America even. By the time you're dead, your children could be inheriting millions. That's the beauty, or at least it should be, of a capitalist society, in my opinion. And it maybe has been for the last, say, 50 to 100, maybe 200 years. I think the cleverer amongst us have realised that a job, even in, you know, times gone by, it might get you a couple of million, but to make something really big of yourself, it's in the world of business, right? And that's okay. But the trouble of this is, when you're in a world where people basically only shop with big brands, you stand less of a chance because, say, you know, Greggs, or a perfect example of this, I think a few years ago, is Tesco's, who, you know, the price of their items have been so low, it's, how are you going to compete with Tesco's price-wise? Of course, a lot of brands are doing it in different ways, say, quality-wise, you know, you go to a butcher's, but not many people can afford that sort of stuff. So the opportunities to build a successful company, successful business, quite frankly, just get less and less as time goes on. And some of you might think, well, Aaron, that's not my kind of problem. I I'm an employee. I don't want to have a business like you. It's not my business. But you know what? It is. And if you're an employee, this is probably going to hit you harder if we think about it. You see, the more market share these companies control, it can have two effects. Number one is price setting. Where else are you going to go for your tap water? There's a monopoly in that market, which means that price setting is a thing. Same with petrol. How are you going to get cheaper fuel? It's basically impossible. You might save a couple of pennies by going to Costco versus, I don't know, BP or Shell, but you're not really saving any money, not really. The price is set whether you like it or not. Now, you see, I always thought the beauty of properly functioning capitalism is the fact that prices can never be set by companies, because they're always set by consumers. For example, I don't know, you get a sandwich, one shop does it for £5, next shop does it for £2.50. You can go to that shop and obviously save the money. And I always thought that is how it was supposed to work in the capitalist system. But whether it's due to poor regulations, whether it's due to, simply put, the way things have gone overall, we don't need to get into every single reason in this video, a lot of prices in a lot of industries are set by companies. And it's not the small companies that do this, it's the big companies. And there's not much people can do. And again, whether you're a business owner who's getting priced out by the fact that your burgers cost £15 to make and you're putting your love and your soul into it, versus McDonald's who can sell a burger for about £2, or whether you're the customer who's seeing the consequence of this, when again your water goes up by 200%, when basically there's no cheaper options, no other options to turn to. And if you're an employee, again, this can still have an impact on you, do not forget that, because as these companies control more and more of the market share, they drive down prices even more, which is, you know, in a way actually good for consumers. But how do they do this? It's by laying off workers, it's by cutting costs in that regard, and that's essentially what we do seem to see in a lot of these spaces. The costs just get cut, and that's quite common, especially at the moment. So what do you do about it? Well, what I would say is we have still got some section of the market that is independently managed, and for me it's about using that more and more. And it's about remembering that the system, or some elements of the system at least, should be serving us, and we are not necessarily there to serve them. For example, you know, the products that we buy, yes, companies are obviously going to make a profit on them, but when companies are sacrificing basically everything in terms of ethics, morals and standards to give us these products, we've got to ask, what do we support here? Now, at 20 years old, I'm basically as guilty as they come in regards to this, because, you know, when you're a student, when you're more broke, on the broker side of things, you do go to McDonald's versus a £15 lunch. You do go to, I don't know, a Wetherspoons for a drink rather than some highbrow expensive bar. And that's how these companies do it, basically. But another thing that I want to say is, when we think about a lot of these companies, we think, well, you know, it was started in this place by this individual, and a lot of times that's true. But what has it become? It's become something completely different, in the sense that a lot of these brands are run by shareholders, and that is the main incentive with these companies. It's more and more about shareholders and shareholder profits. And again, when a lot of these brands are owned by capital firms, again, hedge funds and the like, these companies serve less of their purpose than what they even initially set out for. They're run for money, by money, literally by money. And again, it's very difficult to persuade people to change the trend, because quite frankly, how do you argue with dirt cheap prices, especially when people are feeling the consequences of a lot of the economic situations that we're in now? How do you argue with that? And that's why it's such a difficult thing. And it's getting to the point where even, you know, the mid-tier businesses are being controlled rather by the big tier businesses, who are being controlled by the banks. It's a weird cycle, and this is very true. I think an example that I know quite well, because I'm a big car fan, is let's talk about a company like Volkswagen. Now I have a Volkswagen car. Why do I have a Volkswagen car? Because it's cheap. It's cheap to run, it's cheap to fix. So again, you've been caught by one part of the trap, in the sense that you need cheap products. It's been provided by a big company because of the economies of scale, quite frankly. So that's one part of it. So Volkswagen's a brand. Well, Volkswagen owns Bentley, I think Lamborghini, Bugatti, Seat, Skoda. I think they even own Scania trucks and Ducati motorbikes. They've got their fingers in everything, and that's why it's really one of the biggest car companies in the world. And we're seeing this in a lot of trends. You know, how many companies are owned or in partnership with companies like Nike, companies like Adidas, companies like, again, like Volkswagen and others. It's just how it works at the minute. It's just how big business has gone. But how should we feel about this? Because again, on the one hand, it has had its benefits. Prices for a lot of companies have gone down and continue to be driven down. But as this happens, a lot more independents get driven out of business, whether it's by simply put prices that they can't compete with, a market share or a brand image that people have already bought into to the point where you're not going to be able to reverse that or anything like that. It speaks to a trend that I think we're seeing, you know, and especially in terms of financial means, it's power kind of being taken away from the individual and the small business and being put into the hands of the few, the shareholders, those who have money, because you have to have money to be a shareholder, and especially to be a shareholder that makes a sizable difference or a sizable return on your investment. So it's an incentive to invest in these companies. These companies then drive prices down to keep costs down and keep profits up. Quality drops, and I think we're seeing this in a lot of regards just because it can. You know, I run a business and I try and do my best with it in terms of, you know, customer satisfaction, and I do. I have to take returns of items that cost hundreds of pounds if they go wrong, and it's like, is that painful? Yeah, it definitely is. But what do you do about that? You swallow the loss, and that's not good, but it's what you've got to do if you're running it ethically. But let's say in theory you weren't running it ethically. Well, you're not going to spend the extra money on maintenance or product development or this and that. I think that's why we're seeing companies like Apple, who are basically making the same product year after year, with not much improvements apart from a higher price tag. It's crazy the way it's going, and in a lot of the markets, like I say, it's impossible to get new entries. Like, how are you going to start a new car company in the modern day? It's going to be very difficult unless you're selling luxury or supercars, and even then, it's not very possible. Your independent cafes, bars and restaurants have a chance, but you know, we're seeing a lot of these either shut down or just get bought out by bigger brands, and it's just one of those trends, I think, that we're seeing at the minute, and the solution to it, I do not know. You know, I don't claim to have the answers, but I do see things, and that's all this channel is. It's just me outlining what I see, what I experience, and hopefully there's some enlightenment that you guys can gain from it. So I do not claim to know what the answer is, but I think it's important to note this, and especially for our young people, people my age, maybe 10 years below, maybe 10 years above, you know, around that window. Let's know what we're dealing with here, because say what you want about expensive little hipster cafes that charge, you know, £25 for a latte. Is it silly? Yes. But if it's an independent shop, at least it's empowering another individual, rather than putting more and more capital in the hands of the few. Well, I guess that's all for this one. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. That's really it for this topic. Let me know in the comment section what you think. As I always say, and as I just said before, I'm not an expert. This is just what I see. You know, I don't claim to know everything. Just because you guys subscribe, it doesn't mean that I know anything. It's just my opinions and what I notice as a 20-year-old, you know, going into the world of, quite frankly, being an adult. Just one trend from someone who's kind of interested in the world of money and the like, how things are working in the economy, and how the power dynamic is kind of getting shifted in terms of business amongst other fields. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.